Welcome to the Scientific Dose. Today, we're diving straight into an explainer on how our nervous system and these tiny chemical messengers govern literally everything we feel, think, and do. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. Every single memory you have, every decision you make, and every sudden burst of fear or joy, it's all just the result of microscopic chemical reactions happening in milliseconds. So, we're going to explore this fascinating world of neurochemistry, drawn directly from the academic materials of Dr. Salar Ahmed. To truly grasp all of this, we'll be going on a quick journey from the macro level of your entire body, zooming all the way down to the microscopic level. So, on the agenda today, first we'll meet your nervous system, look at the divisions of the network, explore synapses and how neurons talk, identify the chemical messengers themselves, and finally, look at the happy chemicals and the famous fight or flight response. All right, let's jump right into section 1, meet your nervous system. To set the stage here, you already know your nervous system controls your movements and mental activities, right? And alongside the endocrine system, it maintains homeostasis, basically keeping your body's internal environment nice and stable. Well, neurochemistry is the study of the actual molecules that make this entire massive operation possible. It's literally the chemistry of your nervous tissue. Without these specific neurochemicals running the show, there's no thought, no learning, no memory, and absolutely no emotion. Moving right along to section 2, divisions of the network. Now that we know what the system actually does, let's look at how it's structurally divided up so we can see where these chemicals are operating. There are two main parts here. First, there's the central nervous system, which is just the brain and the spinal cord running right down the center of your body. Then, branching off from that cord, like roots of a tree, extending out to every single extremity, we have the peripheral nervous system. This setup is a brilliant division of labor. Think of your central nervous system, or CNS, as the executive decision maker. It's the boss, processing all the incoming data. Meanwhile, the peripheral nervous system, the PNS, acts as the communication cables. They're constantly running back and forth, detecting things in your environment, sending those signals up to the brain, and then carrying the boss's commands right back down to your muscles and organs. If we zoom in on that peripheral nervous system, it actually splits functionally into sensory inputs, like feeling a hot stove, and motor outputs, like pulling your hand away super fast. But tucked within those motor outputs is something incredibly important, the autonomic nervous system. This is the autopilot. It handles the essential bodily functions we don't even have to consciously think about, things like heart rate, breathing, and digestion. And within that unconscious autonomic system, there's this constant, really beautiful balancing act going on all day long. On one side, you have the sympathetic division. That's what gears us up for stress, keeping us active and highly alert. On the flip side, we have the parasympathetic division, which is all about calming us down to rest and digest. And as we'll see in just a moment, the tug of war between these two states is entirely dictated by specific chemicals. Okay, section 3, synapses, how neurons talk. So we're zooming in from the whole body down to the cellular level now. And what's really wild is that your neurons, your nerve cells, they don't actually touch each other. You'd naturally think it's just one continuous wire, right? But nope. When an electrical signal travels down a neuron, it hits a dead end. To pass the message to the next cell, it has to cross this incredibly tiny microscopic gap of about 20 nanometers. We call that the synaptic cleft. Now, because an electrical impulse can't just magically jump across empty space on its own, the nervous system has to get creative. It adapts. Sometimes it uses channel proteins for an electrical synapse, but much more commonly, it actually converts that electrical signal into a chemical one. And that brings us to chemical synapses, where the message is carried across that little gap by specialized chemical messengers. Which perfectly sets up section 4, the chemical messengers. This is the microscopic heart of neurochemistry. The crucial point here is that when an electrical signal hits the very end of a neuron's axon, it absolutely must be transformed. It triggers the release of neurotransmitters. These are your body's specialized messengers. They literally float across that tiny 20 nanometer space and deliver their instructions to the target cell on the other side. And that target might be another neuron, sure, but it could also be a muscle cell telling your arm to move, or even a gland cell telling your body to sweat. Now, this transmission might sound pretty straightforward, but it actually goes down in a highly orchestrated, lightning-fast sequence of 6 steps. First up is biosynthesis, where the neuron actually manufactures the neurotransmitter. Then it's stored away in these little packages called vesicles. When the electrical impulse finally hits, it triggers the release of those packages. The chemicals diffuse across the gap, and then comes step 5, which is absolutely critical. They bind to specific receptor proteins on the target cell, almost like a key fitting perfectly into a lock. Finally, this binding transduces the signal, which basically just causes the target cell to get excited, inhibited, or modified in some specific way.
All right, let's make this more relatable in Section 5, the happy chemicals.
Out of the 40-plus neurotransmitters floating around in the human body, we're going to focus on the ones that heavily dictate how you feel on a daily basis. These are colloquially known as the happy chemicals: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Working together, these 4 incredibly potent molecules are basically running the show when it comes to modulating our mood, our sense of pleasure, our pain tolerance, and even things like social bonding and feelings of love.
Let's take a closer look at dopamine first. Now, dopamine is super famous as the quote-unquote reward chemical, but it's not just about feeling good in the moment. Actually, it's our primary motivation chemical. When dopamine gets released, it heavily enhances our cognitive functions. It sharpens your attention, aids in memory formation, and really drives your planning and decision-making. It's the chemical that literally motivates you to pursue goals and repeat behaviors that lead to success.
Then, in contrast, we have serotonin. You've probably heard it called the happiness hormone because it's such a major mood stabilizer. But here is a truly wild fact from our source material. While we normally associate our mood entirely with our brain, a staggering 98% of your body's serotonin is actually located entirely outside the central nervous system. Yeah, the vast majority of it, about 80%, is just hanging out down in your gastrointestinal tract, mostly regulating motility in your gut. It's a pretty profound reminder of just how intense the biochemical connection is between our diet, our gut health, and our mental well-being. Let's shift gears from rest and happiness and move into Section 6, the fight or flight response. We need to see exactly what kind of chemical cascade happens when our nervous system detects an immediate threat. When your brain perceives danger, and hey, that could be a literal physical threat or just a really stressful deadline at work, it synthesizes a powerful molecule called norepinephrine, which you might also know as noradrenaline. It's built right from an amino acid called tyrosine. But what makes norepinephrine so fascinating is its dual-action nature. It acts as a neurotransmitter jumping across synapses in the sympathetic nervous system, but it's also released directly from the adrenal glands, straight into the bloodstream as a widespread stress hormone. The very second this chemical floods your system, it drastically alters your physiology for one thing: survival. It rapidly spikes your heart rate and blood pressure. It literally dilates the air passages in your lungs so you can gulp in more oxygen. It even narrows the blood vessels in non-essential organs. Remember that digestion we talked about earlier? Paused. It does this so it can prioritize pumping blood directly to your muscles and brain, giving you an immediate, massive spike in energy and hyper-alertness. This whole massive chemical flood culminates in the acute stress response, better known as the primal fight-or-flight mechanism. Your ancient biology is basically preparing you in a fraction of a second to either stand your ground and fight off the danger, or to rapidly turn and run to safety. The craziest part, your conscious mind probably hasn't even fully processed the threat yet, but your neurochemistry has already prepared your entire body to survive it. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to take a second and think about this. The line between your biology and your psychology is incredibly blurred by these tiny molecules. How is the current balance of your own neurotransmitters, your dopamine, your serotonin, your norepinephrine, shaping your reality right at this very moment? And more importantly, knowing that everyday things like your diet, your environment, and your behavior directly affect these chemicals, what might you do to influence them tomorrow? Thanks so much for learning with us, and we'll see you in the next explainer.